Alright, hello everyone. This video is just to aid you with regards to Practical 4 and everything that was involved there. It was quite a big practical, and so I figured making a video might just aid us and enable us to see it in a bit more detail and go a bit slower than in class. So let us have a look at this practical, and then if you have any questions about this practical, please do raise it during class, or revise it, see where you did things differently or maybe slightly less efficiently, and we can discuss it during the tutorial. So if you remember, for Practical 4, it was a client and a server application. So what I first want to draw our attention to is the actual setup of our application. So how is my project structured? That's really important. So remember, have your Java FX all set up. That's important there. And then let's look at the packages. Now, I'm providing you with batch files, and these batch files only work with a project that is set up as follows. So it has the package for Computer Science 2B, and then it has a client package and a server package. Inside of my client package, it has to have the main class called client.java. Right, very important. Your main class has to be called client for the client side, and for server, it has to be called server.java. You can call your client pane whatever you'd like to call it. You can call your handler whatever you'd like to call it. Since the theme was, Mission Impossible, you could have called it Mission Impossible Client Pane or something like that. And Mission Impossible Handler or Connection Handler and so forth. So the naming of these two aren't that important, but your client and your server main classes, very important. So that's the structure in terms of the source folder. Then we come to our data folder. Now, I've provided you with this data folder as well. Now, the data folder contains a client folder and a server folder. The server side, as you can see, has many images that were provided, which can be downloaded to the client. So when my client clicks they want to download one of these files, when we hit refresh, it should appear on this side. And then vice versa, when my client decides it wants to upload this militarycomputer.jpg, I select that one, and it should then upload and be added to this list. Just to show you, this list is a simple text file, and it contains the ID, which is like 1, and then the name of the image. Alright, then lastly, I also would like to show you all the docs folder. Now, this is just where I simply have my bat files. At the start, I'll just run my solution in Eclipse, and then at the end, we'll run it using our bat files, and you'll see it works exactly the same. So the first one is just to clean out your class folders. I've separated it out because if we kept it in our server and our clients, they would then unnecessarily delete one another's .class folder. So this is just a more simplified modular setup. So we clean our bin folder from old class files, then we compile the server and we compile the client, and it should all work out effectively. So very important that you structure your project as provided to you. Alright, so yeah, we want to keep that data open. Let's close this docs. But yeah, that's the setup. So let's speak briefly about the main classes, and then I'm going to get to the nitty-gritty of things, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on the client pane and quite a bit of time on the handler side. So firstly, let us see. We've got our client. So the client is a normal main with Java FX set up. I create my client pane here. So that is that class over there that I'm creating, and I basically set my scene. I add the pane to that scene, then I set the scene of my stage, and then I set the title and I show that. So that's the main GUI. Now, for your practical semester test, I'll also just expect a simple GUI. You don't need multiple panes necessarily unless you'd like to do so, but just a very simple client-side GUI. The server side does not require a GUI, so that's also a very important point. Then on the server side, we've got a simple server that then gets set up. Now, as you can see, I have my constructor for my server. As per usual, I've got a flag to set the running to true, and then I call a method called run server. Now, what happens here is where I go into my infinite loop. Now, I have that boolean because maybe there would be a condition in future where I'd want to stop my server if something happens. But for now, we're happy with a while true loop. Then I get my incoming connections, which is a socket, right? Which is when I accept a connection from a client coming in over the server socket that I've created, right? And so then I know that a client is connected. This is the multi-threaded part of everything. So I create a new handler. I pass in that handler's constructor, I pass my connection, create a new thread of this multi-threaded class called handler, and I start my thread, right? And then just in the main, I create a new server which is then bound to the port. In this instance, it was 46829. So everything clear over there. So those are our two main classes, and they're pretty straightforward. Now we get to the fun part. Let's speak about our client pane. Now, I assume you're comfortable with the GUI elements, so I won't go into too much detail on that, but I'll just show you how I went about it. So firstly, I had my member variables created. Now, what I did on my client side is I also added a helper variable, which is a string array called list data, so that I can retrieve the list of images that are on my server, and I can keep it in memory on this side, and you'll see how that is useful later on. So please note that variable over there. And then we have our GUI. Now, our GUI just has all the elements that I would like to add to my GUI. So this last variable though is called file to get name. Now, this is when I want to download a specific file and I need to derive what is that file's name, because remember, the client sends the ID to the server, and then it needs to somehow figure out from that list what the name is of the file. So I'll demonstrate that to you quickly. And then just high level view now of my client pane. I set up my GUI, and then I go into all of my button clicks essentially. Okay, so I'm just scrolling. I'll go into those core parts later. These are just some helper methods which will help me with writing to my text streams and reading from my text streams. So nothing difficult over here, but just be aware that these are the helper methods that I made use of. All right. So then I also want to just quickly show the handler. As you can see, it implements runnable. I've got all my streams set up, and then that happens in the constructor where I pass the socket, and then I go into my running method, and then we go into while we're processing commands. Now, I'll speak through all of this code in a little bit. There are some helper methods as well which I want to speak about, and I'll mention that all to you in a little bit. So let's just run this so that you can get a feel for what this had to do. So let's run our server first. So I'm going to click on my server, and I'm going to say run. So as you can see, it's starting the server. And then I'm going to go to my client, and I'm going to click on run my client, and my JavaFX pops up, my JavaFX GUI. So firstly, I'm going to connect. So as you can see, a client connected. I just put a little status message there for the back end. Now what I want is I want an image list. So let's click that command. And as you can see, I actually have a list that's very clearly displayed to me for my different, from my text file, as you can see there. The one is circuitboard.jpg. So I'm reading from the image list.txt file here, essentially over there. So how did I do that? From my client, I've retrieved textual information from the server. Now, I use an interesting method to get that data across and to separate it into a list, and that'll be explained a little later on. So cool, now that we have the list on our client side and we know that these are the images that are available on our server, we're now going to go ahead and try to retrieve one of these images. So let's go for laptop.jpg, right? So that's ID number 3. So then what I want to say is I want to say get image. Then I can see, okay, I've received a file on my client side of 61,461 bits. That's just a nice little status message. So let us actually go ahead and see if that comes through. Yes, our client has successfully downloaded the laptop.jpg on its side. So that's for getting. Now I want to upload an image to the server. So let's say we want to upload this militarycomputer.jpg to our server. How are we going to do that? It's just the opposite of getting the image. Let's post something. So what I'm going to go do is I'm quickly going to get the, let me go get the file, Practical4. Let's go into our data and get that client's. Let's upload militarycomputer.jpg to our server. So click open, and as you can see, I just put a nice little status message there. I could have put it on a new line actually there. But as you can see now, if I hit refresh here, it's added military computer to my server. I've uploaded from the client to the server. And now if I click on the image list, you'll see I've also added the militarycomputer.jpg at the very end there of my list. So here you'll see it's received that on the server side. Now as a last little command, I wanted to display the downloaded image. Now if you remember, we downloaded this laptop ID number 3. So let's display the downloaded image. There we go, it came through successfully and it is being displayed to my client. Alright, so time to jump into the code for this. So that was just a demo. I'll demo at the very end once again so that it's all clear. So let me just stop all the runs. It might not like me too much if I just stop it abruptly, but there we go. Okay, now let's speak about our client pane. Firstly, what had to happen is I had to connect. That's always your first thing you'd want to do. In your connect button, you want to set up your socket. You want to actually make the connection to the server from your client. And then you want to set up your different streams, right? You want to set up your byte streams, your character streams, and your binary streams. That's always what you'd like to do when you're doing a TCP client-server application. Right, remember your try catch, your error handling with the unknown host exception and an IO exception here. Now let's get to the more nitty-gritty of things. Let's speak about the image list and retrieving that. So let's first look at the button click, and then I'll move over to this handler side to see how the server responds to when this command gets sent to it, the img lst. So I send the command over my print writer stream, and the command I'm sending is the image lst. And then I get a response back from the server, right? I can print out that response, and then as you can see here, I use that variable that I spoke about earlier, which is a string array called list data, and I say that is my response and split it by this delimiter. Now this returns an array, a string array, and it splits the string according to this delimiter. So what I done on my server side, and you'll see how I did this, is that it sends the data through from the list as just one line, but it comes through like this, one circuitboard.jpg, and then it's got the delimiter so that I know, okay, this is a new component now, and then the next piece and the next piece, so that I can effectively split it into an array on this side, which is very useful. Then what I just do is I loop through this list data and I append it to my list area, which is a text area in my GUI. So there we go, I've successfully appended it, and it would then display whatever has come back from the server effectively. So there you go. Now let's look at what this looks like on the server side. On the server handler side, firstly, it's got anytime a connection comes in, we will firstly set up our streams, right, in our constructor for our handler. Then when we get into our run command, processing becomes true. We're handling commands for this client session, all right? And so as you can see, we'll first read in whatever command comes through. So this is firstly the message, and then you can break down the message, right? Because the commands come with different command names followed by parameters such as the file size, the file ID, and so forth. So the first token will obviously be the command, all right? And so then I do a switch statement on my command. You could have done an if statement. That's absolutely fine. So what I do is I say, okay, case image list. What happens if I get the command image list? I'm going to say, okay, printWriter.println, and then I call a method which will send a string. So let's look at what this helper method that I've created actually does for me. So as you can see, just want to see here, yeah. So as you then can see, effectively what we'll then be doing is we'll be looking at how the loading of the image list happens. So it returns a string, and firstly what we do is we try to create a scanner, and this scanner is going to read from the file called imagelist.txt. Remember, we're on the server side here, we're in our handler class, and it's going to read from its imagelist.txt. So while this file has a next line, I'm going to say, okay, the image or the string of the image name is sc.nextLine, and then I'm going to build up a string to return, and I'm going to add that image name to it plus a hash so that I can nicely split that string up when it is sent through to the other side. So it's going to continuously do this until each line has been read and concatenated to this string. This string has been built. Then there's just some closing up of the scanner, and I return this string. So the string will be in the format of 1 and then file name 1, and then it will have a hash, and then it will be 2 and then file name 2, and then it will have a hash, all right? And then it'll have maybe 3 and file name 3, all right? And let's say that is our this is the way in which our data comes through. Then on the other side, on our client, what you saw is it will split this into an array using this as a delimiter. So then my array will simply contain 1 file name followed by 2 and file name followed by 3 and file name. Alright, so I do hope that that is clear. So that is it for the handling of the image list command up top. Let's move on to actually now getting an image. This is retrieving the image file from our server. So back to the client side, let's look at what happens. We firstly get the ID that needs to be retrieved. Now if you remember, I entered that into a text field, and I get that text using the getText method from my text box. Then I send the command and I say, okay, I'm going to use the print writer and I'm going to send the command getImage followed by the space and the parameter called ID to retrieve, right? So I'm going to say getImage ID 1, 2, or 3 from what I could derive from the list, all right? And then I get a response from the server. Now, firstly, I'm going to read the response, and always what the server will do is it will first send back the file size to me. So that's what I had to write in my server on the other side, which we'll look at just now. I had to make sure that the server will send back the file size to the client first before actually sending the file, in order to warn the client, look, this is how big the file is that I'm going to send you, prepare that amount of size, or prepare to receive this amount of bytes, okay? So as you can see here, I'm going to then just give myself a notice. This is the size of the image that I am going to be receiving. Then I need to get the file name from the list data. So essentially I'm asking the question, okay, it's all cool. I'm wanting file number, file number 1 or 2 or 3, but what should this file be called? Now I'm going to do a quick search on the list data that I have, all right? Now here you go. You're going to go through what for each string in our list data, and then you're going to split up this string. Obviously, the string contains two elements, right? It's got, let me just comment in here. It's got an ID, right? Which is followed by a space, and then it's followed by the image name, basically. Now, what we're interested in is, now obviously any client could just be like, oh, I want ID number 2. And then what you need to do is the client just needs to cleverly know, okay, what should I call this file when I download it on my side? And you should then call it the same as what it's called on the server. So I'm going to search for this image name. So what I'm going to say is, if the ID that we find in this list, right, is equal to the ID that's been entered into the text field, then I know that the name of the file that I want to get is equal to the name that I've just arrived at. Alright, so this is in a for loop, okay, so you're continuously looping through the list, and until you get where the IDs match, then you know what the file name should be, right? So make sure you take some time to understand this piece of code. It's basically just a search for matching IDs to retrieve the file name that you should call this file. Cool. So now we finally know what to call this file. So I can create this file that's going to be downloaded, and I'm going to give it a path as to where it's going to be stored. Now remember, this file doesn't contain anything just yet, but we're going to download from the server and receive the data from my server. So here, this piece of code should be very familiar to you. You should know it and you should use it. Okay, so I'm going to use my file output stream, and I'm going to be writing to this file to download. I create my byte array, and I have an integer n to keep track of the number of bytes that I've read, and I've got the total bytes. Alright, so while my total bytes is not equal to file size, right, which I've received from my server, then I'm going to continuously read that over my data input stream. I'm going to read it into the buffer, and then I'm going to write whatever is in my buffer from byte 0 to n. I'm going to write it on my file output stream, and my total bytes will be incremented. Right? So make sure this should be familiar to you. And always have a nice finally clause for that file output stream to be closed. Just good error handling and closing up of streams. Alright, so that was it for the get image command. Let's see what it looks like on my handler side. It's pretty much the opposite, right? So here you'll see, what does it look like? Okay, in case the get image command comes through. Firstly, I get the file ID. Okay, so I've already got the command, and then I know that the next token will be the file ID because that's part of the parameter of this particular command. So I'm going to then need to read through the data to find the matching ID's file name. So once again, same thing happens here, and I am essentially going to find that file. Alright, so as you can see here, I can properly get the file name that I want to return. So once again, just a nice little search through that file list. Okay, then I need to send this file. So how am I going to do that? I first need to create a file in order to send this particular file across that I've just found to match with the ID that's being requested. Okay, so this was the same kind of code as previously. Now let's move on. If this file that we want to return exists, it's a very important check to have in place. Then I'm going to first send the length. Remember, that's what happened on the other side. I'm going to send the length first to the client and flash my stream. And then, as per usual, this piece of code should be familiar to us when we want to send binary data. So we're going to create a file input stream, a byte array, and an integer. Then while there are bytes to read, or while there is data that we're reading from our file input stream, and it's greater than 0, you're going to write whatever is in that buffer from byte 0 to n onto my data output stream, and then always nice and to close your streams at the end. Okay, so that's where we've effectively done the download aspect of things, where we did that, where you saw that laptop being downloaded to the client. Okay, so let's move on then to almost the last command. I had a posting of an image. Now this is where I want to upload, so this is a little different. This is where I use a file chooser to effectively upload a selected file from my client to my server. So you could have selected it from anywhere on your computer. In my case though, I just selected it from this particular directory so that I could upload this military computer .jpg. Then I get what the selected file is. It's the file chooser.showOpen dialog and show it on this stage. Now this is where it's really important for you to note that you need to have just want to find it. Your client pane should have if you want to make a file chooser visible on your client pane, one way you can do that is to make use of this stage parameter in the constructor. Alright, so that's where, as you can see here on my client, where I created my client pane, it's got this primary stage that it functions on, right? And so that was useful so that it knows which stage to display on this file chooser dialog. Alright, and so then I've got my selected file, and then I can get the file name from that selected file.getName. So that's useful. Now I need to determine, because this is a file that is to be uploaded, so I need to give it an ID, right? So we need to make sure it is the latest list data, right, which I've retrieved. And you may assume for the purpose of these pracs that we're doing these commands in order from the first one of listing right through to the end. So you may assume that you would have this list data in memory. We've got the length of it, but then we're adding another ID to it because this is a new file that we're uploading. Then we're sending the command, right, and we're sending it in this format. Firstly, you're sending the post image command. I'm sending it the file ID, and then remember space, very important. Then I'm sending it the file name, and then I'm sending it the length, right? Very, very important, so that our server now in turn is prepared for how many bytes it should receive. So it's basically just the flip of the previous approach. So now, as you can see, we've got our file input stream where we're gonna read this selected file, and we're gonna read it into a buffer, and we're gonna write it out, whatever is in the buffer, onto our data output stream. And make sure you flush and then close the streams, and then we know that the file has been sent for upload to the server. Now you might receive a response from your server. Now this is where those statuses that I gave you were important. I think it was it like wonderful or something like that? Depends on what the protocol requires, alright? And then you append that to the response area text so that we can see what the status is of this uploaded file. And then always important to have some exception handling. Okay, so that is for our client side when we want to upload a image. Now on my server side, when I am receiving a file that is being uploaded, remember the command structure. It's the upload command, right, which is post img. It's followed by the ID, the name of the file, the size, and then the actual image. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, string file ID is the next token. Then we've got the name, which is the next token. And then we have the size, where we can use integer.parseInt to convert the string to an integer. And then what we can do is we need to actually go ahead and create a entry in our imagelist.txt. So I need to write to this imagelist.txt so that this new image that's being uploaded to me as a server on the server side is added to the list. So how do I do that? I just used a print writer in order to write to that, and then I also used a buffered writer there as a as wrapped in there, and then new file writer to write to my image list.txt. And this flag, if I'm not mistaken, is for appending to it, that it allows for, it's the appending flag. Then we print the line, we add a new line. Now this might be, depending on what was previously done, it might add an extra space in your text file, so just be careful with using the special line characters. In my case it did actually do that, so it's just a small little bug that I need to fix here. But the main thing is that I have added that file ID as well as the name to my file, my image list.txt, as you can see here. So just need to sort your the way you're appending, if you're printing a line, and making sure that you remove the gaps over there. Okay, so then what we get to is we want to receive from our client because they're uploading to us. And here you go, it's the same code as before for receiving a binary file, right? So after the file has been received, the server does one more thing, and it actually goes ahead and says, okay, here's the status for you. I finally printed everything out, and we're done here. If something goes wrong, we tell our client, look, everything's not okay. There's been a bit of a problem. So this is quite important for the status messages that I did give you to handle. And then finally, just closing your file output stream, quite important, often put in a finally block. So that was that. You could create a button for disconnecting as well on your client side, which is where you'll finally close up all the streams, but that will be discussed a little bit more later on in the next prac. So what I also want to draw your attention to was the last button click, which was the displaying of the image that was downloaded. So this was the file to get name, right? So how do we do this? Image is new image, file, and it goes to our, remember it's a relative path, so we've got our data/client, and then we know that there's a file to get name, which in this case was laptop when I just ran it, right? And then we create an image view, and we set the image of this image view to this particular image that has just been downloaded, and then we add this image view to our what would you say, it's our pane, right? Yeah, to our client pane. It's just been being added as a normal image view from col span, row span, column and row. So column 4 and the row 1. So make sure you are just very clear on how to add to it. So sorry, I had it the wrong way around. So column 0, row 7, column span is 4, row span is 1. So sorry, I just mixed those up. I wanted to say something didn't sound quite right there. So yes, we've added that image view over there, and then it'll successfully display it. So that's all good. That is pretty much what was required for this particular practical. I had these helper commands at the bottom. I've added my various UI elements. I've had all of these methods done, my posting of the image and the actual getting of the image and the image list and the connect button up top. And same on the handler side, just handling the different commands using a select case or a switch command, and you're welcome to use an if statement instead of a switch command over there. Just handling each and every one of those, and it should all be fine. So I did not use this method, but you'll see in your next practical there's a get file name from ID method that you might want to make use of effectively. Loading image list we actually made use of, and there's another method called match user, but we'll discuss that a little bit more next time. So I hope this was helpful to you. Let us quickly run it from using our batch files. So let me open up this source. So over here, Let's just make sure everything is cleared out that needs to be cleared out. So I'm going to let us delete the laptop, pretend like it was never downloaded, and pretend like military computer was never uploaded. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's update our image list like our military computer was never added to that list. And let's go ahead and look at my bat files. So in your solution, in your docs folder, you've got your clean bin.bat. So when you double click on that, it will clear out your bin file. Then I run my server and everything should happen and be alright. Okay, there was a bit of an error. Alright, let's have a look there. Could just be that it didn't recognize a character, it seems like. $185. That's pretty strange. That's an issue. Shouldn't be. Okay, it successfully started my server over there. Then let's build our client. And it should create it for us. Oh, once again having some issues with special characters. That's very interesting. Well, then let's go and just correct that on line 94. 94. It's probably some strange thing that it's not happy with over there. Thankfully, it's just with comments, so we can go ahead and try run it again. Great, and it is successfully running my project now. So what I'm going to do is I'll draw our attention to our different folders in the backend as well. So I'm going to say firstly connect, and so I assume everything is alright on that front. Let's go to our data folder, and I'm first going to want to do a download, so let's go do that. Let's see here. I'm going to first get the image list. Works as per usual. There we go. And then let's get ID number. Maybe let's get number 1 this time, circuit board. So let's say get image, and there we go. As you can see, the circuit board popped up there on my client side. And then I want to post an image, okay? So I'm gonna try upload this military computer. So let's post this image. Let me just copy this path. Let's go there. Upload this one. It'll successfully upload it, and look at the status coming through as well for the server responses. And then let's see that it has indeed successfully uploaded it. So as you can see here, the military computer was successfully uploaded on this side. And now we can actually display what was downloaded to my client. Remember, it'll be the circuit board.jpg. It might be a little big for this GUI, but in any ways, let's display it. Oh, not too large. And there we go. The circuit board is displayed. All right, everyone. I hope this was helpful, and make sure you go through it and that you are clear and understand Practical 4, and all the best with Practical 5 and your preparation for your practical semester test on the 27th of September.